Hello, welcome to this video tutorial. Today's video tutorial is on congruent triangle statements and using algebra with congruent triangle statements. So today's tutorial is going to be using the third angles theorem. Now I've edited the theorem a little bit to make more sense. If two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles of the triangles must be congruent, making the whole triangles congruent to each other. So the whole triangle will be congruent. So the objective is name and use corresponding parts of triangles. So for our first example, we'll look at the figure to the left right here. It tells us that CA is congruent to DO, and we can tell because of that one tick mark on both of them. Then we can tell that CT is congruent to DG because of these three tick marks that correspond. And we also know that AT is congruent to GO because of the two tick marks. Thus, we know, because of all those three, that triangle CAT is congruent to triangle DOG. And we're not going to worry about SSS yet, because that'll come in a later tutorial. But we also know now that angle C is congruent to angle D. Angle A is congruent to angle O, and angle T is congruent to angle G. Okay, next triangle. It's the figure to the right now. We're actually not going to do number 3, so we'll cross that out. So this one, RD is congruent to CP because of the little tick marks. Angle D, because see, we have this thing now. Don't worry about that tick mark. We don't do that normally. That's not really common to have the tick mark in the little round thing. Because of that round thing, though, and this one has the same one, just one, we know angle D is congruent to angle P because it has one marker. We also know that side ED is congruent to AP, side AP, because of the tick marks. And we're not going to worry about that. We know that these triangles are congruent because at least two sides are congruent. But we also now know that RE is congruent to AC. And we also know that angle R is congruent to angle C. So let's put the little marks in. This one will use 2 marks. And we also know angle A is congruent to angle E. So we'll use 3 marks. Okay. So the next thing is we're going to try some. So you can pause the video and try them. Okay, welcome back. So we are going to try these together. So our first one, we have these two triangles, and we got to identify the congruence in it. We're actually not going to do the middle one. So we see angle B, side AB has 1 tick mark, and side JK has 1 tick mark. So let's write that as one of our congruent statements. So side AB is congruent to side JK, and it's necessary to have it in that order. Otherwise, we won't know that those angles are congruent. Okay, next would be side AC is congruent to side JL. AC is congruent to side JL. And then side BC is congruent to side KL. So now we gotta do the angles. So I'm gonna overflow into the area where number 2 is. So we know angle B, because of these two lines, is congruent to angle K. So angle B congruent to angle K. We know that angle A is congruent to angle J. And we know that what one did I miss? Angle L is congruent to angle C. So on number 3, we're not going to worry about writing congruent statements for the angles like we did over here. We're just going to do the we're going to prove why these are congruent by writing congruent statements for the sides. So on number 3, we see that there's actually lines like this on this one, showing that there's some lines are parallel. So we need to write why the triangle is congruent. So we see that MJ is congruent to KL. So we gotta write that. MJ is congruent to KL. Okay, so next we see that these two sides have the same amount of triangles. Like little, like, not triangles, but like little parallel markers. So because of that, we know side JK is congruent to side LM. So because of that, we know that triangle, so we know that triangle KJM is congruent to triangle MLK. So now we're going to name the corresponding congruent angles. So these triangles are congruent. They don't say it, but they are. So what we're going to do is we're going to name the corresponding congruent angles. So on the first one, angle F is congruent with angle K because they're corresponding. Because if you flip that triangle over, they would be on top of each other. So we can write down angle F is congruent to angle K. Okay, next. Angle E is congruent to angle J. Because again, if we flip the triangle over, they would be on top of each other. So angle E is congruent to angle J. So next one. Angle G is congruent to angle L, because if we flip the triangle over, they would be on top of each other. So angle G is congruent to angle L. And we're actually going to skip number 5. Okay, now on this page, we're going to identify the congruent triangles in each figure. So we see in number 1 that angle A corresponds to angle D. So let's write that. Angle A is congruent to angle D. And then we see angle B is congruent to angle R. And then we see angle C is congruent to angle S. And then we look at the sides. So I'm not going to write these ones down, but we see side AB is congruent to side DR. Side BC is congruent to side RS. And side AC is congruent to side DS. So because of all of that, everything is congruent. We know that triangle, you got to name your triangle with that little triangle. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DRS. And it's important to make sure you go in order when you're naming the triangles of congruent angles. So angle A is congruent to angle D, angle B is congruent to angle R, and angle C is congruent to angle S. So, next one. So, again, I'm not going to label anything. I'm not going to write down any of this time. But angle L is congruent to angle Q. Angle M is congruent to angle P. And angle N is congruent to angle N. And then we see side LM is congruent to side QP. Side MN is congruent to side PN. And side LN is congruent to side QN. So because of all this proof, we know that triangle LMN is congruent to triangle QPN. Okay, down here, we're going to skip number 4. But number 3. So, we need to name the congruent angles and sides in this one now. So, we know that they're in order, so they're each one corresponds with the one in the same slot. So G, L, K, M, P, N. So we know angle G is congruent to angle L. Angle K is congruent to angle M, and angle P is congruent to angle N. And then we know for sides that side GK is congruent to side LM. So let's write that. Side GK is congruent to side LM. And then we also know side KP is congruent to side MN. And then we also know side PG is congruent to side NL. So, the next thing we're going to do is use some algebra with these. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve for x. So we're going to set up our equations. So side BC is congruent to side EF, so we know those are equal, so that's how we're going to solve for x. So we're going to do 3x minus 7 equals 20. Then we're going to go through our steps. We're going to do plus 7, 3x equals 27, divided by 3, divided by 3. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. So x equals 9. Thank you for watching. That's all.